Thank you, everybody, for attending the Ethics in Publishing Conference. We've had a great 3 days now of different speakers, and welcome to the closing plenary, the recommended list, 10 notes I've learned from diversity and inclusion efforts so far. I want to remind you that after the closing plenary, we will have a networking virtual happy hour, which is a separate link in my WebEx room. Your email invitation should have that. I'll also put it in the chat. So first, I want to introduce Louis Simpson, Senior Vice President, Global Policy, Association of American Publishers, who happens to be my next door neighbor as well. And I think this presentation kind of illustrates how publishing is both a small world and a global world. I first heard about our presenter, Elda Rotor, when I was traveling in the Philippines last summer. And I'm very happy to have her present about diversity efforts at Penguin. So, Louis?
Good afternoon. I'm Louis Simpson, as John said, with the Association of American Publishers. I trust you've found these proceedings both interesting and informative, and so it is perhaps fitting that we close these proceedings with this afternoon's session on diversity and inclusion, a topic most timely. It is my pleasure to introduce Elda Rotor, Vice President and Publisher for Penguin Classics. Elda oversees the U.S. editorial program, including the works of John Steinbeck, Arthur Miller, Shirley Jackson, William Golding, Ing Tan, and Alice Walker. She created and edited several series, including the Penguin Liberty series about constitutional rights. Her latest titles include the work of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg called Decisions and Dissents. Elda has led the Penguin Publishing Group Diversity Committee and is a member of the Penguin Random House Diversity and Inclusion Council. Elda is also a board member for the Academy of American Poets and Kundiman, a national organization dedicated to Asian American creative writing. So good afternoon, and Elda, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Louis Simpson, for the introduction. Thank you, John Warren, for inviting me to join. Happy Friday, everyone. It's the end of your work week and near the end of this year's GW Ethics in Publishing Conference. You've explored many topics together through the lens of equity, inclusion, diversity, and accessibility. In this year of the pandemic, of global protests sparked by the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others, and the activism led by Black Lives Matter, there is an urgency more than ever to not only talk as a society, but also as a company in terms of social justice, inclusivity, and equity. Since 2017, I've led, organized, and supported D&I initiatives for both my division, Penguin Publishing Group, and Penguin Random House as a whole as part of their D&I Council. Today, I shared 10 notes in no specific order, drawn from what I've learned from D&I efforts so far, and hope that they will be helpful to you and your work with your company. Number 1, what is your company culture? We are in a business of storytelling. We identify and publish voices who represent a wide range of professional expertise, intellectual acuity, and creative imagination for our readers. We also employ professionals who are bringing their unique and personal experiences and expertise to the business. The issues of diversity and inclusion no doubt spark uncomfortable situations, friction, and disagreement when talking about, for instance, systemic racism or white supremacist ideals. While individual employees can debate and argue about viewpoints, what is most essential is establishing what your company stands for. What is your company culture? In order to do any meaningful work, or even to communicate clearly and fairly to employees, clients, business partners, stakeholders, and your audience, a company needs to articulate what it stands for. All business practices and communication are under the umbrella of the company. So it's very important to spend the time to break it down, to debate and discuss, and share publicly what the mission and beliefs of the business are, and how it currently responds to what we talk about as a society. Number 2, buy-in begins at the top. Junior employees tend to do the hands-on work of D&I initiatives. Junior employees are the majority of the consistent attendees at meetings. Depending on the demographics of your company, it can also be true that BIPOC, or Black, Indigenous, and people of color employees, many of them also junior, are doing the hands-on work and participating the most. Despite their passion and commitment and the high quality work they execute, the work cannot be sustainable unless it impacts policy, and this must be driven by the highest levels of leadership. Buy-in and accountability begin with the president and the board and the highest divisional leaders. At every level, employees need to be upskilled in D&I to gain some fluency. It requires a program of education from unconscious bias to racial equity training that should be rolled out first to the topmost executives to equip them to lead by example and to enable them to identify and work on policy changes for a more equitable business. Don't leave it to junior people to work on individual projects, but think more high level of what changes need to be made to policies. Number 3, invest in D&I in general. D&I can't be left to a monthly meeting and to a seasonal campaign. As you would consider the costs of upgrading the technological infrastructure of your publishing house, the same can be said for the investment in a more equitable business. This might involve changes to hiring practices and human resources. It might require revamping departments and adding new roles. Investment includes recruiting consultants or partnering with D&I organizations to help guide new initiatives across all departments, from human resources to acquisitions, to marketing, to communication. It's difficult to expect informed and well-researched work to exist without the guidance of experts. Number 4, establish a D&I council. While the responsibilities for most of the impact a company can make in D&I remains at the top, it is essential to have a working group of employees who communicate and collaborate together so that action can take place across departments and all levels. A council can serve as a bridge between employees and senior leadership, ensuring employees are considered in business decisions. Council members both have access to on-the-ground initiatives and can relay when resources or senior leadership support is required. Council members work closely with divisional heads and communicate directly with board members. Recruit volunteers and count their leadership in D&I initiatives as part of their professional development. Consider investing in the employees who are investing in the company's D&I progress. On the other side, a company has to think, how will it work with a council in crisis moments? A council is made up of individuals who provide honest feedback about business decisions, but they do not serve as one-stop experts. A council can advocate and facilitate a D&I agenda, creating open avenues of communication across a company. A council can offer questions with a D&I lens that can strengthen a business strategy and avoid missteps. Number 5, show me the numbers. Audit yourself. There's one thing to discuss changes a company will make to improve representation and to instill equitable policies, but knowing your current numbers in terms of your workforce and in terms of your business are crucial to enable a company to create benchmarks to measure progress. This applies to an internal analysis on an individual employee level, a department level, divisional, and company as a whole. Encourage employees to use the knowledge of an audit in positive ways to create future goals in terms of acquisition or new budget allocations or new outreach for recruitment. It's important to take the time to look at where the industry and your company as a whole stand right now. With the example of Lee and Low, surveys take the temperature and provide data to analyze together. Metrics speak volumes and are a helpful reference point for future progress. From this analysis, real work can be measured by a company to change existing processes, systems, and ways of working that have been identified to hinder equity, diversity, and inclusion. Number 6, don't reinvent the wheel. As newly inspired or outraged as colleagues are to start diversity initiatives now, It is humbling and helpful to acknowledge that somewhere in your company's recent or past history, there have been employees who have done similar work, however large or small. Take the time to ask your colleagues who have overseen initiatives or built committees in the past and learn from them and learn from how your colleagues can build upon that existing work. Listen, ask questions about challenges and roadblocks, share information, and then work together. If numerous projects and initiatives are launching across your company, make room for those teams to talk to each other and learn from each other. Number 7, change up who sits at the table. At any company, power dynamics are real, and they can keep marginalized voices unheard. When I hear stories, not only from our industry, but other industries, about the tone deafness of a campaign, I wonder who was in the room when that decision was made. By actively including the voices and perspectives of colleagues at different levels and departments, you have a better chance at building an inclusive workplace and getting closer to the production of your work reflecting a more diverse audience. It is also a great way to learn from and identify the talent that exists around you and encourage their contributions to make your business even stronger. One of the only good things of working remotely is the WebEx or Zoom Brady Bunch grid, which evens the visual playing field of who sits at the boardroom table. Encourage the employees who might not have a chance to speak up to start first, or be sure to allow for all attendees to have a chance to contribute. These opportunities should not be one-offs, but steady commitment to give colleagues the opportunity to contribute to the conversation, especially if they see things differently. Number 8, emotional labor is real. Do your own homework. The complicated issue of wanting to do better and educate yourself is the reliance on the underrepresented employees who embody the diversity that is sought. Hypothetical actions I do not recommend include inviting junior colleagues who do not hold any power to meetings with outside clients to reflect the diversity of a team that is not authentic, or asking colleagues to read manuscripts solely because of their ethnic or racial background, or just plain expecting BIPOC colleagues to explain to you why so many people are upset about American dirt. Be mindful of the emotional labor, especially of your BIPOC colleagues. But how do you address these issues, and how do you make improvements if you can't ask the people around you who may have experience that can inform you? Do your own homework. Spend time reading recommended books and articles. Have conversations with your colleagues without pinpointing someone you assume can be a culture expert. Anti-racist resources are available everywhere. 2 books that I've been reading include How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi and Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall. Look at your own list of authors and community experts and invite them to engage with your employees. Create a book discussion group together. Ask your colleagues to share recommendations to broaden your familiar pool of media and resources. No person is exempt from a continued education around D&I. Number 9, learn and use the norms. One of the most deceptively simple and valuable resources I've seen sought out and used throughout the year is the norms. That is a list of meeting guidelines for how to start and sustain a conversation around not just D&I issues, but difficult topics to address together. It's useful to both recite them at the beginning of a meeting and have the list available for people to refer to. It's ideal if the norms become part of your company culture in general. Hand in hand with this is to invest in and train conversation facilitators or inclusion partners. This is a skill set that not everyone naturally possesses. These facilitators not only know how to uphold the norms, they also are trained to ensure a safe space for all employees to participate and to patiently moderate what could be difficult conversations through silences and through hot button topics. Here, I'm going to stay with the number 9, learn and use the norms, in more detail, breaking down 7 norms. We are going to make this list available to you as well. The first norm, experience discomfort. One of the key characteristics of what I think is a productive and authentic diversity committee meeting is the excruciating silence. In that silence, people are actively trying to figure out their place in the conversation, what they should say, how they should act, what is appropriate. It's okay. A facilitator's probably counting to 10. If you're not feeling any sense of discomfort, ask yourself, are you fully engaged? The next norm, take risks. One of the most compelling problems I've learned about is the inability for people to say they disagree. It is a common problem. People are afraid of coming off as angry or difficult, and that fear can be greater the less power you hold at work. We need language to at least introduce the idea that someone might disagree, or someone takes offense, or someone wants to take a minute to process something that doesn't feel right. It could be a phrase like, let's take a pause. Or it could be helpful to use the colors, green, yellow, and red, or specific hand signals. But we need to give colleagues the ability to make space for saying something that might be unpopular and for bringing up uncomfortable subject matter. The next norm, stay engaged. One of the challenges of working remotely right now is not seeing our colleagues physically in a meeting and being able to read them in order to communicate better. It's important to try to stay present in the room, even if that room is virtual. Pay attention to when you're shutting down. The next norm, listen for understanding. Be careful not to compare your experience with another person's. This often invalidates or minimizes a person's experience. If someone shares a negative reaction to what you've said, sometimes it's necessary to just say, I didn't realize what I said was inappropriate, or I didn't mean to hurt you, I'm sorry. There's much energy and time placed into explaining good intentions. On the surface, it seems like the right thing to do, but it takes away from the real work of taking someone's perspective in. Resist the need to explain. Speak your truth. I can't stress enough the importance of providing safe spaces for colleagues to communicate. Sometimes the pressure to remain polite prevents people from addressing real questions to work together. Be mindful of using we instead of I statements. Speaking your truth means speaking for yourself alone, without assumptions that your perspective represents all people's perspectives. The next norm, expect and accept non-closure. It sounds strange, but I've never felt as close to colleagues as I have when we all together find ourselves lacking a sense of closure. The pandemic has certainly provided a multitude of offerings in this area. This is ongoing work that doesn't feel great, does not provide a sense of accomplishment, but accepting and expecting non-closure allows for the risk-taking. The last norm is actually my personal favorite, and I always have to think about this for myself. No fixing. Sometimes people want to fix each other with reassurance. We get very uncomfortable with seeing each other vulnerable. However, it's important that we let each person in the room experience their own discomfort and not fix it for them. If you find yourself wanting to fix a situation or make someone feel better, pause for a moment and reflect on what is going on with you. Now, back to those 10 notes. As a recap, here are the first 9. Number 1, what is your company culture? Number 2, buy-in begins at the top. Number 3, invest in D&I in general. Number 4, establish a D&I council. Number 5, show me the numbers. Number 6, don't reinvent the wheel. Number 7, change up who sits at the table. Number 8, emotional labor is real. Do your own homework. Number 9, learn and use the norms. And the final note to end this plenary is, drum roll, number 10, don't forget the joy. The pressure or uncertainty of how to handle D&I and more equitable measures in business can cause a lot of grief, stress, and a lot of insecurity. It can also get very emotional. Dr. Kendi shared a fascinating concept called feelings advocacy, which I encourage you to look up. Feelings advocacy is a very insightful and uncomfortable idea to consider the sustainability of D&I work if it depends on personal expectations, if it relies on the fact that you are starting to feel better yourself. Focusing instead on changing policy and working towards a more equitable workplace provides its own kind of lasting joy. Through these honest assessments and challenging conversations, as a company, you take in where there is failure, but you also make room for where you can do better. The joy comes in better communication and collaboration. The joy is in welcoming people to bring in their authentic selves to work and in providing a safe and inclusive workplace. It's found in the authors and books that you publish and in the voices that you choose to amplify, maybe some of them that are new. It's in the employees that you currently work with who support the company culture in their own unique ways, and it's in the future employees you will seek out. And for the publishers, the joy is found in your readers, our readers and audience, maybe previously untapped markets who will be happy to learn about your initiatives and support your books that they see reflect their lives and interests. In an ideal world, diversity committees will become obsolete because companies will think holistically about diversity and inclusion, viewing all people and business through a D&I lens. Until then, we have to work individually and as part of the publishing industry. And it all begins with coming together as a company and a community and figuring out what you stand for and working towards that vision. Thank you for your time and your questions.
Thank you very much, Elda. These are all great lessons. And as we've seen in these 3 days of sessions, there's a lot of great work going on in different organizations on diversity and inclusion and equity and accessibility. I want to thank you, Elda, for presenting and Louis for making this introduction. We are able to take questions in the chat, and I want to remind you to join our networking happy hour after. And I especially want to thank all the attendees for attending these sessions. And please feel free to send me an email with your feedback or suggestions, or if you would like to contribute an article to the Journal of Ethics in Publishing. Again, my email is jww@gwu.edu. And thanks again, everyone, for your work, presenters, organizers, and attendees.